One of the more popular terms that have come from the East is the word karma. In the third teaching, the Dalai Lama explains the Buddhist understanding of the word and shows how deepening our comprehension of karma leads us back on the chain of dependent origination to the origin of suffering, which is the fundamental ignorance at the root of our existence. This, in turn, leads us to an understanding that suffering can be overcome, which is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. Karma is mistakenly understood in the West as almost identical to the Western notion of destiny or fate. Most people think it's responsible for what happens to them. They say, it's my karma, or it's my fate. But the Buddhist idea is somewhat different. The central notion about karma in Buddhism is that it is the evolutionary result of an intentional act. Whatever we do with intention has an evolutionary impact on us. Furthermore, every act produces results, some beneficial, some detrimental, and some a mixture of the two. When we trace the effects of our actions, the law of karma becomes intimately connected with Buddhist morality. How should we act in any given situation? It is not something imposed from without as an absolute moral code. It arises out of every situation quite naturally, once we become aware of the workings of the law of cause and effect. How do the workings of karma tie into the search for liberation from samsara, the frustrating, self-centered life cycle? This returns us to the fundamental confusion or ignorance at the base of our existence. From this ignorance arise afflictive emotions. These emotions create negative actions, which produce more suffering and unfortunate karma, which will ripen in the future. It's apparent that the afflictive emotions are a real obstacle that must be removed if we are to approach the third noble truth, which is the liberation from suffering. Another Buddhist term widely misunderstood in the West is anatman, which has been variously translated as egolessness, selflessness, and even soullessness. Anatman is the word used by the Buddha to describe the ultimate nature of reality. It is a synonym of emptiness. It's a very subtle concept, and many Western commentators have used the notion of selflessness to highlight what they mistakenly think is the nihilism of Buddhism. At this point in the teachings, the Dalai Lama lays out the tenets of the middle path consequence school of Buddhism, the Madhyamaka Prasangika, that demonstrates that the soul, self, or I that is being negated is only the notion of an independently existent I, an intrinsically objective I. The relative self is never denied. The relative soul is never denied. The self that exists is therefore not mere nothingness, but a self that, by virtue of its emptiness, is interrelated with the totality of the world. The person who believes that the self is a permanent, separate existence will always see a fundamental division with the world, will always be tormented by the consequences of this division. I and not I, mine and not mine, desire and aversion, love and hate, life and death. Out of this fundamental duality spring all the afflictive emotions and the karmic acts that perpetuate suffering. Ignorance misunderstands the self to be something absolute apart from the world. Wisdom understands the lack of such an absolute self, thus recognizing the existence of a relative self that is related with and interconnected with the world. The Dalai Lama brings home the point that insight into the nature of the self is what the Four Noble Truths are all about.
Oh. Yeah. I'm here. Yeah.
Lovely to see you. Beautiful.
Yes. 쟤는 어다? 동네 ene mendu shindu da 동네 gyurya chinjungda ene Taiwan de shen do ji de ju chi ji ma lo ba ji bu ge da du mo tu ya di ene ga re le ba slam na mong ba wang ge yu ge ba che mong ba de le ya ene da chu ji ran she yun du land la mong ba da ta khona yi la mong ba se ni mong ba ni shen mi ya re.
So yesterday we spoke about the fact that what we naturally desire is happiness and a wish to overcome suffering. But in contrary to our natural aspiration, often we tend to create more conditions for our suffering, and also we are ignorant of the ways of creating causes for our own happiness. So what we found is at the root of all of this is a fundamental confusion, or in Buddhist language it is called the fundamental ignorance. And this is sort of a state of confusion in relation to not only the way things are, but also in relation to way causes and effects sort of follow each other, and causes and effects relate to each other. Therefore, in Buddhism, when we talk about fundamental ignorance or avidya, we talk about two levels of ignorance. One is the ignorance or confusion relating to the laws of causality, the laws of the karma. And the second one is confusion or ignorance pertaining to our understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. And these two types of ignorance or confusions are related to the two levels of understanding of dependent origination, or pratitya samuppada, that we spoke about earlier. The understanding of the pratitya samuppada in terms of dependent origination, in terms of causal dependence, will enable us to dispel this confusion pertaining to karmic laws or causality, and understanding or deep insight into the interdependent origination in terms of the ultimate nature of reality will enable us to dispel the confusion or ignorance that pertains to our understanding of the ultimate nature of reality.
Ene tu mari ko de chigor beslam na ta ma me bare mari ba the wang le ene nyom ba shem ma guchi ta yong de ya re seneta ngam ba ne su be na ene sibe za cha ge chu chene ta wang da de ming ngas chene ba chena ene de le she bare da ga na shingi ene nye nyom ba ni ni shu de da song che ye bare.
So, however, this does not mean that this ignorance or confusion is the only cause of our enlightened existence. Of course, there are many other derivative causes, which or conditions, which in Buddhist languages, sort of technically called affective emotions and thoughts, and this is a very sort of complex class of emotions and thoughts, and we find sort of detailed descriptions of these emotions and thoughts in the Abhidhamma literature. For example, according to Abhidhamma literature, there is an understanding that there are 6 sort of root emotions, negative emotions, or thoughts, out of which arises 20 sort of secondary types of emotions and thoughts. So there is a complex explanation of the world of emotion and thoughts.
Nga shung nala ne enya ene ngo gyawa yin ba ya ji lunga ten yin de ba tende gi ta namdo ya mindawa deju sam shi ni rang shi deju kundos de ya sigo kwa kwa ya gi du shi
and also we find sort of another sort of further